Production.
The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Born on October 21st, 1772, in the town of Ottery St. Mary in Devon, England, Coleridge was the youngest of 14 children and attended his father's school. After his father died in 1781, the then 8-year-old Coleridge was sent to Christ's Hospital School in London, where he remained throughout his childhood studying and writing poetry. This is where he would meet his lifelong friend, Charles Lamb, another English poet. Growing up, tales such as Robinson Crusoe and Arabian Night captivated the young Coleridge, and at a young age began to idolize a fantasized world. Coleridge's father wanted his son to become a clergyman, so when enrolling into Jesus College, University of Cambridge, in 1791, he focused on a future in the Church of England. His views, however, began to change in his first year at Cambridge. He began to support a fellow student, William Friend, whose Unitarian beliefs made him a contentious figure. Inspired by the democratic ideals of the French Revolution, Coleridge and fellow poet Robert Southey found a utopian commune-like society called Pantisocracy. The society would eventually disintegrate. Due to social constraints, Coleridge married Sarah Fricker in 1795, in spite of being in love with someone else. Coleridge's marriage turned out to be an unhappy one, and he grew to detest his wife. In 1795, at the age of 25, Coleridge befriended another poet by the name of William Wordsworth. The two would collaborate on writing lyrical ballads, which contained Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Arguably, the poem was inspired in a conversation between Coleridge and William Wordsworth, who had recently read A Voyage Around the World by George Shelvocke. The story depicts an incident where Shelvocke's second-in-hand shot an albatross. Coleridge died in Highgate, London on July 25, 1834, at the age of 61, as a result of heart failure, possibly linked to his opium addiction.
This story is about an ancient mariner that stops a wedding guest from going to a wedding simply because he wanted to tell him a story. The story starts off with a ship, and aboard the ship are the ancient mariner who is telling his story and a bunch of his crewmates. There's a big storm, and it pushes the ship into the south, and snow and giant glaciers appear. An albatross then comes out of nowhere and shows the crew that there is life in the Antarctic and gives them hope. The albatross continues to follow behind the ship, but out of nowhere, the mariner shoots the albatross and kills it. The crew was furious with him for killing the albatross with no reason at all. Soon after, the fog cleared up, and after the albatross had died. There was no wind at all once the breezes ceased. This caused the ship to be stranded in the middle of the sea with nowhere to go. The sailors and the mariner became extremely thirsty with nowhere to go, and the crew starts to believe that a spirit had been following them from the South Pole. They then hang the albatross around the mariner's neck. The sailors become thirsty to the point where they cannot even speak to each other. The mariner sees what he thinks is a ship approaching, and then he bites his arm to drink his own blood so he can alert his crew. Shortly, they come to realize that the ship has been sailing closer to them. The ship that has been sailing to them was a ghostly ship that was sailing without wind blowing. The sailors start dying one by one from thirst. Seeing the sailors falling off the deck, the mariner looks up to the sky and prays and fails. It is later that night that under the moonlight does the mariner see beautiful water snakes swimming beside his boat. It's at that moment that he realizes that all of God's creations are to be valued and not to be harmed. The mariner falls into some sort of stupor, and when he wakes up, he is granted absolution for his sins by a hermit. The mariner concludes his story by telling him wherever he travels, he is compelled to find someone to tell his story and then enlighten them.
There are several different poetry techniques that Samuel Taylor Coleridge uses to enhance his literature. Some of them include metaphor, simile, symbolism, and imagery. But for the theme of the poem, it's a tale of retribution. As the mariner inherently kills the albatross, which was sent by God as a sign of good luck, and is now cursed for refusing God's help. After doing this, he realizes what he did wrong, and his penance is up, and soon is washed over with rain and is renewed and then helped by God for living a new life. For personification, one of the few examples is death. Samuel Taylor Coleridge personifies death by portraying it as a skeletal woman with blonde hair and red lips. Thanks. One metaphor he uses is comparing the angels to red lights that guide the ancient mariner to shore. One thing of symbolism is he uses rain to portray renewal, as after his penance is up, the rain washes over him, symbolizing that he has been reborn into a more holy life. Another thing of symbolism is the mariner himself. With his sparkling eyes and long white beard, it is a common portrayal of God that most people see. And finally, for the most important symbol of this book is probably the albatross itself, which is symbolized as the cross that Jesus carries, similar to how the mariner has to carry the albatross around his neck. And